So today, cultivating metta for groups of beings and then all beings, continuing the training of the heart in a bigger space, continuing the purification of heart in a bigger space. So, as I said, I don't know, 4 nights ago now, I think, several nights ago, this training and purification goes through predictable stages. As we go through this series of categories and different layers of kilesa, hindrances, emerge to be seen and worked with. In the commentaries and the Visuddhimagga, there is a term that is used often to describe this being breaking down the barriers. And this has quite a specific meaning. Meaning the metta is balanced and impartial and equal across all the categories. And really this whole process of both purification and training, what we see is a gaining in balance as we go from category to category, as we go deeper and deeper into the water. From the Visuddhimagga, it says, one should practice loving kindness over and over again, gaining impartiality towards the 4 persons. So these 4 people obviously being the different categories of people. And that, over and over and over aspect, I'm sure you're all quite familiar with that right now. And this is a balanced impartiality of care, because remember, we practice loving kindness, we pay attention in order to care. So it's this balanced and very impartial caring. Remember from in here where it says, unbounded towards all living creatures, without boundaries. Manasam bhavaye aparimanam is that Pali that's repeated twice. There's a metaphor given in the Visuddhimagga that's quite confronting. So Buddhaghosa says, imagine you're on a foot journey and you reach a crossroads, and you're accompanied by your benefactor, your dear friend, the neutral person, and the enemy. So there are 5 of you. And when you get to the crossroads, you're confronted by a group of bandits. And interrupting the story to remark, in India, even today, in parts of Bihar where the Buddha was living, you can still encounter bandits. So this would not be an unfamiliar experience for people. And the bandits come to you and they say, we need one of you for a blood sacrifice. You choose. Who do you choose? Do you say, oh, take me, I'll sacrifice myself for everybody else? Or do you say, and what Buddhaghosa says is, if metta is boundless, there's no difference between any of those 5 people. You can't choose. And a couple of people have mentioned this experience already. This sense of myself, benefactor, the dear friend, feels the same. And sometimes people say, I was radiating, like especially like this morning when we had all those people in one group. Some people say when we do that, they say, it felt exactly the same for everybody. What am I doing wrong? If the metta is strong and present, people aren't doing anything wrong when that happens. That's a good sign in the practice, that the metta is developed and is quite strong and powerful. Remember back when I was talking about metta air conditioning. This is when that metta air conditioning becomes really apparent. It's such a relief, because no matter who we bring up, there is this natural care that emerges, that wells up almost like water out of a spring. And with difficult beings, it's not that we're blind to their difficulty. We see that. We see that very clearly, actually, and it's okay. It's really okay. We see the difficulty, we can still radiate well-wishing. So instead of fighting how they are or reacting to how they are, we simply can wish them well. The freedom is from all that judgment, anger, comparing, and sometimes the wishful thinking that they didn't live on this planet at all. I mean, it can be like that with very difficult people. So it's really worth lingering at this place in the practice for some time, this place of over and over again, working with the categories, because this is where we develop and strengthen that balance. There have been some really beautiful descriptions in the reports that people have been offering of stuff coming up and just the metta holding that. So even though the practice still goes through cycles of up and down and up and down, when there are difficulties, there is this balance developing. And this is that effect of doing this over and over and over again. And there's, at a process level, I mean, it's a different phenomenon, but at a process level, there's a lot in common with what we do in Vipassana. Because just as in Vipassana, we observe phenomena repeatedly over and over again to develop equanimity, here we work with beings over and over again to develop a balanced equanimity of care. It's actually a really beautiful parallel of process. In Vipassana, we're of course working with absolute reality, and we observe phenomena as many times as we need to, 100 times, 1,000,000 times, to gain this strength of equanimity that is necessary for insight, deep insight. And what we're gaining is this insight, or this equanimity about the very nature of phenomena, so that when that equanimity is strong, the mind just rests in the middle of this hurricane of samsara, unmoving. And the mind is just very still. It's not pulled to reactivity about anything. In fact, the Pali word for this form of equanimity is, it's a kind of tatra majjhatthata, which literally means thus in the middleness. That's what happens in Vipassana. Here, through this doorway of conventional reality, we have a similar process where we observe and we work with different categories of beings over and over and over again, developing equanimity about beings and what they do. And the equanimity as a Brahmavihara, upekkha as a Brahmavihara, has that same quality of being in the middle of everything. But it's in the middle of conventional reality and able to hold other beings in the heart with evenness and balance and without reactivity. So we can wish well with genuine impartiality. That's the boundlessness of metta. It's the mind that can radiate metta no matter what. So it's not the same kind of equanimity we have in Vipassana. It's a very different experience and a different mind state, but it shares that quality of balance. And in the same way as with Vipassana, when we begin to see impermanence and we see more and more, in the same way we begin to see this balance with the very first categories. And both between categories and within them, the basic instruction is to start easy. Start where it's easy. Then go increasingly difficult. Somebody related, they were working with an easy, difficult person and it seemed to be going very well. And they thought, okay. They got a little kind of, we say in English, cocky, a little bold. So they thought, what if I go to my most difficult person? And there was an immediate reaction when they started doing that. And they very wisely backed off. It was like, nope, not ready for that. And so you go back to where it's easy. Observe again and again and again. Radiate metta again and again and again. And then tiptoe a little deeper and see how it feels. Especially where we contact really deep things in this practice, as all you know, you all know we do, especially when that happens. We need to be careful not to push the pace, not just try to speed up the process. Okay, if I keep watching, no, not to push that at all. But also on the other side is, please don't assume just because it's very difficult that, this will take 20 years of therapy and a whole lot of practice before it's done. So please don't assume based on temporary reactivity this will be a lifetime piece of work. Often we turn that into a story of our lives and of our practice. And it might just be the kind of story that's one thought. Oh my word, I have my work cut out for me. Projecting ourselves into the future. Just thinking because of a strong experience, this will mean years worth of work. Or maybe we've seen a lot of dosa that we really didn't know we had that tendency. We can say to ourselves, I have so many barriers, I'm never going to get to that place of equanimity. In the moment, yes, maybe. Don't forget, in the moment, maybe we do. But don't forget, nothing is the same for a single moment. So when that dosa is gone, it's really gone. Not to turn it into something solid and project it out into an eternal future. This is a place that comes back to that piece I was talking about at the very beginning of the Metta Sutta. Trust in yourself and trust in the process. You've made it this far, you're definitely capable. So trust that. And also remember, when you have those thoughts of, oh, I have so much work to do, that actually, not to forget, all we do is to create the conditions for metta to arise. With that over and over and over again continuity, and then it arises by itself, and the barriers are broken down by the metta, not by us. We don't have to break those barriers down. So of course in this practice we're faced with more content and more stories about our life and about our psyches. That can feel huge. But you know what's actually huge, as opposed to just imaginary huge? That's metta. The boundlessness of metta is immense, beyond our imagining. And one moment of metta can obliterate so much dosa. So, we arrive after doing this over and over again at all beings, from one being to an infinite number. It shares certain qualities with metta for the neither loved nor hated person. And as I said this morning or last night, I forget at this point, really there's not a lot of difference between the challenge we have with one being and many beings in terms of the fact there's no storyline there. It's just that challenge is magnified. One being okay, but all of those beings. And we can feel in this process a little lost. Even just radiating metta to groups, not even getting to all beings. I feel it most particularly, for example, if I'm radiating metta for all beings nearby, that's relatively easy. I can imagine them, I can visualize them. Sometimes I can hear them. As we were doing that this afternoon, there was a bird singing outside, and I thought, oh yeah, you too. And then we switched to all beings far away, and we're just in the fog. It's like who? And maybe we know beings far away, so we can watch the mind latch on to some beings we know who live far away, so that we have a storyline. But this is actually kind of like a crutch, because this boundless metta doesn't need a storyline. We think we need a storyline, but actually the metta doesn't need that. So this is a place where we encounter a feeling of groundlessness in the practice. Or we can repeat the phrases and it feels just conceptual. It just feels like words. And we might be able to relate to the meaning, but there's no real connection. And this is a place just to remember how the metta does its own work, and it radiates by itself. I had a moment last night that it was so interesting. I was walking down the driveway towards where I stay, and it was after the last sitting, so it was getting dark. And I'd left the light on in the entry, so I'd be able to get up the stairs without falling on my face. And it hit me at a whole new level. It's like that light bulb out there. It's not trying to send those photons of light to me. It just happens. And I use this metaphor a lot when I speak about metta. But this was an experiential, it's like, oh yeah, the light just goes out without being pushed out or sent out. And it touches everything that it encounters. Whether the light bulb doesn't know anything. It doesn't have to. It just goes out. The light just goes out. So another metaphor you can use for this is like dropping a rock into a very still pond. You see the ripples go out. And those little waves will go all the way to the other side of that lake. It's just the consequence of having dropped the rock in there. So we create the conditions for metta to arise. And as a consequence, it just goes out without our effort, without our needing to know who it's touching. So there is sometimes with all beings this initial challenge of needing some tangible contact. As we more and more and more work with this category, we realize, oh yeah, that's actually, I don't need to know where it's going. So this challenge pretty much takes care of itself the more we practice. The second challenge, though, we can experience with all beings is more experiential and emotional than it is practical. So perhaps we can connect, but it feels overwhelming. There's so much suffering in the world. And that's only in this one planet, let alone in the whole universe. Who knows what else is out there, the way of suffering. And we can get overwhelmed with grief and a kind of empathetic distress. And we need to find a balance in this because we can't turn this off. It's like everything. You can't just turn it. You can't just go, where's the switch here? Oh, there it is. You can't do that. When we meet suffering, this is, of course, in the Buddha's path, this is inevitable. And in this context, it's so easy to slide into toxic states. But we don't have to live there. And here's where we find a balanced ground by bringing in wisdom. Because with the enormous suffering of samsara, compassion is our doorway in. Compassion, like metta, has a near enemy, which is all those toxic states. It's grief particularly. But when joined with wisdom, compassion is always balanced. There's a beautiful Tibetan text called the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, the Bodhicharya Vitara. And the being who wrote it, a person named Shantideva, was very direct. And there's a line in there that the Dalai Lama likes a lot, and he quotes it a lot. And one gets the sense that he relies on it himself a lot. And it's a quote that directly speaks to this balance, the balancing aspect of wisdom, and how wisdom balances compassion so we don't live in those toxic states, so that we don't really suffer with empathetic distress. And it's incredibly pragmatic. So when dealing with the suffering of others, Shantideva says this: if something can be done, what need is there for dejection? And if nothing can be done, what use is dejection? I really love this because, that sadness, it just points to the fact that grief, that sadness is just getting in the way of what we can do. And if there's nothing we can do, it just adds to the burden of suffering. And of course, this, what came to my mind when I first read this was the famous prayer of San Francisco. So basically, God give me the strength to accept what can't be changed, the courage to change what can be changed. And this points directly, both of these quotes point directly to discernment. And sometimes the Dharma is so beautiful in its wholeness because discernment is the purified form of dosa. So as we go through these categories and the dosa gets purified, what it turns into is discernment. So it becomes more and more and more available to us to be used in this very case. And compassion is hard. If one is developing the Brahma Viharas as a meditation practice, one begins with metta because it's easier than compassion. And compassion is simply that metta that turns towards suffering and quivers, the heart quivers, is touched, but unmoved. And if we wanted to develop compassion as a specific practice, the texts are very clear saying, first develop metta. So there's this interesting paradox. Compassion is our doorway in to really receiving the pain of samsara, the pain of the world. But in order to specifically develop it, we need more metta. And that takes us right back to that place of that quote from the Visuddhimagga. He should practice loving kindness over and over again, gaining impartiality. It's if we fall into grief, to reflect about compassion is enough. We don't have to develop it specifically. And to balance it with wisdom and to continue with the metta practice is all we need to do. It just takes patience. The world isn't ours to fix. And we can practice from now until the end of time, and nothing will change the nature of samsara. But slowly what does change is our relationship to that. Metta bhavana doesn't change what's happening outside, but it transforms what's happening inside. And we develop that resilience I was talking about the other night. So all of those challenges that we face when working with this category of all beings, all those places where we fall into difficulty, these are, of course, our very places of practice. Just as we work with dosa for the difficult person or lobha for the dear friend, we gently work again and again and again with these edges of grief, these edges of reactivity on account of the state of samsara. And just as with an individual person, we can't decide one day, okay, today I'm not going to slide into grief. You just can't do it. It requires balanced attention again and again. It requires maintaining this mindfulness, etam satim aditya, again and again and again. The Buddha said, there's a line in the Majjhima Nikaya I like a lot. The Buddha said, whatever one frequently thinks about or ponders, that will become the inclination of the mind. So again and again, we connect with our reactivity. We connect with that experience of grief on account of the world, which is actually a very powerful thing to connect with. And we feel it. It's simple. And we acknowledge it with that beautiful honesty that the Buddha talks about in the sutta, ujucha, sujucha. It's like, no, I'm not okay with samsara. And we also acknowledge what we think we should feel and just let that be without getting involved. Somebody came in one of their interviews and it was a quite amusing way they put it. It's like they had this voice in their mind. One of those very old voices I think all of us have. It's like, you should, nah. Don't you know the world is the way it is? We might have that thought. Nothing can be controlled. Get over it. I've had that thought. I think of this as the voice of Mara. Mara appears in the suttas all the time. Mara is the being who shows up when somebody's breaking into some new insight, practicing in an onward leading way. And his function is to keep that from happening. The Buddha up there has the Buddha putting his hand on the ground. And that mudra, that's the Buddha's answer to Mara. Mara came to the Buddha the night he decided, okay, tonight's the night. I'm going to sit here and I'm not getting up until I'm completely enlightened. Mara threw everything at him. You know, the armies of demons, the beautiful girls, and the Buddha was just like, eh. Basically, it's like, try it. Yeah, no, I'm not susceptible to that. Finally, at the very end, Mara didn't have any more weapons. He said to the Buddha, who do you think you are to have that aspiration? That voice of mana, it's like, you're not good enough. This is the last kilesa to disappear before one is completely enlightened, is mana. It'll be around for a while, everybody get used to it. And the Buddha put his hand on the ground and he said, the earth shall be my witness. And Mara just went, I've lost. And he went away. And of course, we all know the Buddha was enlightened that night. And so, when those thoughts come about the state of the world, those voices of helplessness and grief, or even just in the practice, those old voices of doubt, breathe into that experience and go, I hear you, Mara. Because it's the ego that wants to save the world. And it's the ego who feels that grief. We have to be gentle with that. That feeling of helplessness that we can't fix it ourselves. And just holding that, doing metta for ourselves if we have to. Until again and again and again doing this metta, the resilience builds and we can hold it. Turning to the wisdom of that Shantideva quote, if we need to balance everything, just keep going. It's the instruction that the Buddha gives us is always the same. No matter where we are in the practice, either very, very much in the beginning or far along, there are always new edges, new places to feel into, new places to purify. That's where the humility that the Buddha mentioned in the beginning of the Metta Sutta is very, very useful. Munindra used to say all the time, and I remember this sometimes, and it's very comforting, because it applies to all of us. He used to say, my path is not finished. And to hear such a being able to say that, it was such a beautiful thing. So much natural humility. So when developing this balance of this Brahma-Vihara balance in the world, it's like, my path is not finished. And to remember, whatever we frequently think about, that will become our natural inclination. So just keep going. I'll leave it at that tonight. Thank you for your kind attention, and let's sit for a while to let the words settle.